Behind the veil of ancient empires, a cosmic war raged. One man fasted for 21 days, yet the delay wasn't human. What held back the answer to his prayer? The Prince of Persia wasn't a man. An Archangel Michael stepped in. Welcome to a revelation you won't hear in Sunday school. In Daniel 10, the prophet sees a vision so terrifying that his strength leaves him, and what unfolds next is no mere spiritual metaphor. This is the story of heavenly warfare, angelic hierarchy, and a demonic prince who ruled over a kingdom from the unseen world. Today, we uncover the truth behind the Prince of Persia, who, or what he really was, the incredible mission of Archangel Michael, heaven's warrior, who broke through a supernatural blockade that even stunned the prophet Daniel. Prepare for a journey into divine intelligence, prophetic mystery, and cosmic warfare that rages behind every answered prayer. The invisible war behind a simple prayer. It all began with a prayer simple, humble, and desperate. The prophet Daniel had been mourning for weeks. He fasted. He withdrew from rich food, wine, and even the touch of comfort. There was no dramatic voice from the sky, no sudden fire, just silence. But in the unseen realm, his whispered prayers were shaking the heavens and stirring a war that even he couldn't imagine. Daniel, now an old man, had spent most of his life in exile. He had seen empires rise and fall Babylon. He had interpreted dreams, seen visions of beasts and horns, and glimpsed fragments of God's plan. But now, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, he had received a vision so troubling that it left him physically weak. The vision seemed to point to great suffering for his people, the Jews, and Daniel needed understanding, so he did what he always did. He sought God. But what Daniel didn't realize was that the moment he began praying, he triggered a confrontation far beyond the borders of Babylon or Persia. His prayer called down a divine response, but something, or rather someone, stood in the way. 21 days passed, silence, and then it happened. Daniel stood near the Tigris River when he saw something, or rather someone so overwhelming that it drained every ounce of strength from his body. He was with others, but they didn't see the vision. They only felt a terror so thick they ran and hid. Daniel alone remained, trembling. He saw a man clothed in linen, with a golden belt of pure apes. His body gleamed like beryl. His face had the brilliance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. This was no ordinary man. It was an angel, perhaps Gabriel, against him from heaven with an urgent message. But what the angel said next would leave Daniel stunned. "Fear not, Daniel. From the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard." From the first day, God had heard immediately. There was no delay in heaven's decision. But then the revelation takes a darker turn. "And I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. The Prince of Persia. Daniel must have wondered who could resist an angel sent from God. Surely no human king could fight an angelic being. His prince wasn't Cyrus or any earthly ruler. This was something else. This was a dark power, a spiritual entity, a high-ranking fallen being who ruled over Persia in the unseen world, a territorial spirit, a dominion of darkness, a principality, as Paul would later call it. And for 21 days, he resisted the heavenly messenger, blocking the answer to Daniel's prayer. It wasn't that God was ignoring Daniel, it was that a spiritual war had broken out the moment he prayed. And then came the name, "But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." Archangel Michael, the warrior of heaven, the protector of Israel. Michael, whose name means, "Who is like God?" A name that is not a question, but a battle cry. When the resistance proved too strong, it was Michael who came. Michael who tore through the darkness. Michael who broke the blockade in the spiritual realm. Only with his help could the angel get through to Daniel. This wasn't a myth. This wasn't poetic symbolism. This was God pulling back the curtain to show Daniel and us that prayer moves armies in heaven, and that every word we utter before God can set off a chain of cosmic battles we cannot even see. But it also revealed something terrifying, that the rulers of this world are not just human. The Prince of Persia was not a fluke. He was part of a network. Later in the same chapter, the angel says, "Soon I will return to fight against the Prince of Persia, and when I go, the Prince of Greece will come." There are forces over nations, over kingdoms, over governments, demonic beings assigned to reach. These are not fairy tales. This is spiritual intelligence from the Word of God. And yet, the most shocking part is this. The angel couldn't break through alone. Think about that. A holy angel of God sent, in response to a faithful prophet's prayer, was delayed for 3 weeks because of resistance. He needed backup. He needed Michael. That's how fierce the opposition was. That's how real the spiritual war is. The same war Paul describes when he says, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places." Daniel, a man in exile, worn and grieving, couldn't see it, but his prayers were thunder in the spirit realm. His fasting starved the enemy's influence. His persistence drew Michael into battle. He never lifted a sword, but he helped win a war, and so do we. Every time you pray, even when it seems nothing is happening, something is. Every delay may not be denial. It may be a battle. The silence may be the sound of angels fighting through enemy lines. What's even more profound is what the angel tells Daniel after breaking through. "Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come." The vision wasn't just for Daniel. It was for generations, for nations, for the end times, and that vision was so critical, threatening to the forces of evil, that a high-level demon fought to stop it, but he failed. Because Michael came, because Daniel prayed, because God never loses a war. In this moment, heaven showed its cards. It revealed the system. That every prayer can activate heaven. That spiritual battles have jurisdiction and timing. That angels war. That archangels lead. And that one of the most feared enemies in the spirit realm, the Prince of Persia, was not unstoppable, never victorious. Because if Michael is coming, the enemy is already trembling. In Daniel 10, the veil between the physical and the spiritual is momentarily lifted, and we glimpse into the fierce war that takes place beyond the realm of human perception. The prophet Daniel, an old man by this time, was deeply burdened. For 3 weeks, he fasted and mourned, praying not for his own sake, but for the future of his people. Israel had returned from exile, yet the promises of restoration were slow, unfulfilled. There was opposition in the unseen world, and Daniel, a man highly esteemed by heaven, would become the recipient of a revelation unlike any other. As he stood on the bank of the great river Tigris, a vision appeared before him. He saw a man clothed in linen, with a belt of gold, his body like beryl, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches. The sound of his words was like the roar of a multitude. Those around Daniel fled in terror, though they could not see what he saw. Daniel himself fell face down, trembling. This celestial being, likely the pre-incarnate Christ, or an angel of high rank, touched Daniel and strengthened him. Then, astonishingly, the angel revealed that his arrival had been delayed, not by distance or hesitance, but because of war. For 21 days, he had been resisted by the prince of the kingdom of Persia. This was no human monarch. This was a territorial spirit, a high-ranking demonic power assigned to influence and manipulate the kingdom of Persia, an empire that at the time ruled the known world. The delay meant that even angels, though mighty, could face obstruction. The heavenly realm was not without resistance, and darkness held territory that required strategic spiritual engagement. But then came a name that would change the direction of the battle. Michael. "But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me," said the angel. Michael's arrival shifted the battle in heaven's favor. With his help, the messenger was able to break through and bring the answer to Daniel's prayer. Here, the Bible reveals that Michael is not merely a messenger or worshipping angel. He is a warrior, a chief prince among the angels, one who stands guard over Israel. And when the principalities and powers of darkness seek to interfere with the will of God, it is Michael who steps in to confront them. This passage demolishes the naive idea that spiritual warfare is symbolic or passive. It is real. The Prince of Persia is not just an allegory, it is a spiritual entity whose mission was to delay, obstruct, and ultimately prevent divine will from unfolding in the affairs of men. That Daniel's prayers coincided exactly with the 21-day battle shows. Who is that prayer is not simply about asking, is participation in an invisible war. Daniel's consistency in prayer created a heavenly breach. His devotion empowered the angelic realm to persist. God, in his wisdom, allows humans to partner with heaven in such a way that our persistent seeking opens the way for supernatural breakthroughs. Moreover, the identity of Michael in this passage is profound. He is introduced not just as an angel, but as a chief prince. In Hebrew, this phrase, Sahagadal, implies archangelic authority. Michael's role is repeatedly described as standing for the people of God. In Jude 1-9, we see Michael contending with Satan over the body of Moses, rebuking the enemy not in his own name but invoking the authority of the Lord. In Revelation 12, Michael and his angels fight the dragon Satan and his angels, casting them down from heaven. This consistency reveals Michael as the primary general of God's army, the enforcer of divine justice, the defender of heaven's authority against rebellion. When nations rise against God's people, when spiritual systems stand in opposition to truth, Michael is the one dispatched to enforce divine intervention. Back in Daniel 10, the angel not only speaks of the Prince of Persia, but says, "After I go, the Prince of Greece will come." This foretelling reveals that spiritual principalities exist behind every dominant world empire. As Persia waned and Greece rose, so too would a new demonic force take dominion. This aligns perfectly with the sequence of prophetic visions given earlier in the book of Daniel, visions of beasts and kingdoms, representing Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. But now we understand that these empires were not merely political shifts, they were manifestations of spiritual battles won and lost in unseen dimensions. The transition from one kingdom to another involved the displacement or rise of principalities in the heavens. This understanding challenges our modern, materialistic view of history and politics. Behind every war, every regime, every major cultural movement, there may lie a spiritual battle, a contest of angels and demons, of light and darkness. The message given to Daniel was not just about his time, but for the generations to come. It reveals that prayer, intercession, and divine timing are not coincidences. They are coordinated with the rhythms of heavenly warfare. The angel tells Daniel, "Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come." This prophetic insight, birthed in conflict, sealed in battle, was delivered because a man refused to stop praying and because God's warriors refused to be defeated. But perhaps the most sobering truth of Daniel 10 is that spiritual forces can delay divine messages. The angel was sent from the first day Daniel prayed, but it took 21 days for the breakthrough. How many prayers have gone unanswered, not because God was unwilling, but because we stopped praying too soon? Daniel's consistency sustained the battle until reinforcement arrived. Michael came, but what if Daniel had quit on day 10? What if he had lost heart? We learn that our persistence is not just for personal gain, it is spiritual leverage. Michael's actions against the Prince of Persia show us that God is not indifferent to global empires and political systems. When the plans of wickedness seek to dominate, when a nation is under the influence of spiritual corruption, God dispatches his generals. Michael's involvement teaches us that God intervenes not just spiritually, but geopolitically. He will move heaven and earth to accomplish his purposes. And when the delay comes, when the breakthrough seems withheld, it is not a sign that God has forgotten it. It may simply mean the war is not yet won in the heavenly places. Daniel's vision ends with the angel stating he must return to continue fighting the Prince of Persia, and then the Prince of Greece will rise. This is not a peaceful closure. It is a call to awareness. The battle is ongoing. The war for influence over nations never truly stops, but neither does Michael. In the spiritual realm, battles are not fought with swords forged by human hands or with the strength of mortal armies. They are fought with authority, obedience, and divine purpose. Archangel Michael's confrontation with the Prince of Persia was not a clash of brute force, but a cosmic standoff between heaven's will and the resistance of dark dominions. For 21 days, Daniel's prayer remained seemingly unanswered, not because God was indifferent, but because a war was being waged behind the veil of the visible. When Michael was dispatched, he did not merely help another angel escape. He came as heaven's enforcer, as the commander of God's angelic host. His presence signified something deeper, that there are moments in divine history when even angels require backup. That is the weight of the unseen conflict Daniel glimpsed. This brings us to a mysterious reality. Spiritual resistance isn't always generalized. Evil, it can be strategic opposition. The Prince of Persia wasn't just blocking prayers arbitrarily. He was safeguarding territory, maintaining strongholds in a region long known for empire and influence. Persia was the epicenter of culture, science, military might, and pagan religion in Daniel's day. Behind its thrones and palaces sat a spiritual entity determined to delay God's revelation to humanity. And when Michael arrived, His very intervention was a declaration of heaven's claim over that region. God was asserting sovereignty not just over people, but over the spiritual authorities influencing nations. But the story does not end with the defeat of one spiritual prince. Michael tells Daniel that after he leaves, the Prince of Greece will come. This wasn't a political prophecy alone, it was a spiritual forecast. Behind Greece's rise would be another powerful principality. History confirms it. As Persia declined, Alexander the Great swept through the known world. But behind the human conquest was an echo of the same spiritual struggle. The succession of empires in the Bible isn't just about kings and kingdoms, it's about the shifting of spiritual dominions. And in each of these shifts, Michael and the hosts of heaven are not passive observers. They are active agents in shaping prophetic destiny. There's a hidden truth here that most miss. Michael isn't just a guardian of Israel, he's a guardian of prophecy. Every time a divine timeline is under attack, every time a vision risks being intercepted, Michael appears. His role is not merely defensive, but prophetic. In Daniel's case, it wasn't just the message being blocked, it was the timing. Delayed prophecy can mean delayed obedience, and heaven could not allow that. Michael's intervention was God's way of saying, "My word will not return void. My timeline will not be the gates of hell shall not prevail." The revelation Daniel receives after Michael's battle unveils some of the most detailed prophecies in Scripture. Kingdoms rise and fall, the Antichrist is foretold, and the final battle is described. But none of this would have reached us if Michael had not acted. That's the magnitude of his role, not just war, but the preservation of divine communication. He is the bridge between heaven's intention and earth's reception. Without Michael, entire generations could have been left in darkness about what God was planning. He doesn't just fight for people, he fights for truth. And yet, there is an even deeper layer to all this. When we consider the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece, we are looking at patterns, not isolated events. These spiritual rulers still exist in modern forms. They don't wear ancient robes or sit in golden courts anymore, but their agendas remain. Corruption of truth, resistance to revelation, confusion of prophecies are still their weapons, and still today, Michael stands. Revelation 12 paints him as the great warrior who will one day lead the final expulsion of Satan from heaven. That future battle connects back to Daniel's vision. It is the same war, just a different chapter. And it reminds us what happened in Persia wasn't just for Daniel. It was a prototype of the spiritual battles that rage in every generation. As modern believers, we must not underestimate the relevance of Michael's confrontation. Prayer delays may not be signs of divine silence, they may be signs of spiritual resistance. Answers may be en route, but prophetic clarity may be real, but opposed. In such times, we are not abandoned. Heaven still sends Michael, and though we may never see him, his presence is written across every breakthrough that should not have happened, every vision that finally came, every word of God that reached us despite the odds. As the spiritual conflict unfolds, in Daniel 10, another mysterious and awe-inspiring figure steps into the frame. Michael, the Archangel. Unlike the Prince of Persia, a fallen entity opposing God's plan, Michael is described not merely as an angel, but as one of the chief princes, and later in Daniel 12, as the great prince who stands watch over the children of your people. His intervention is not casual or coincidental. It is deliberate, authoritative, and cosmic in scale. When the messenger angel is delayed for 21 days, it is Michael who comes to his aid, breaking through the resistance of the Prince of Persia. This single act opens a portal into the greater reality of angelic warfare, that even the faithful messengers of God may be hindered by dark territorial spirits, unless a higher-ranking heavenly authority like Michael intervenes. What Michael does is not just engage in celestial combat, he alters the outcome of history. His arrival doesn't merely free the messenger, it ensures that the revelation Daniel needs to receive is not lost in the shadows of resistance. This moment is critical, not just for Daniel's understanding, but for Israel's destiny, and by extension, for the unfolding of the redemptive plan of God for humanity. Michael's role here is emblematic of a divine pattern, that God appoints warriors to defend truth in the heavenly realms, just as he does on earth. And Michael, by his very name, who is like God, embodies the challenge against every spirit of rebellion that dares to defy divine order. His confrontation with the Prince of Persia is not simply about delay, it's a confrontation of dominions. The angelic world, as Scripture suggests, is governed by rankings and jurisdictions. Michael's presence marks a shift in authority. The Prince of Persia may hold temporary influence over earthly empires, but when Michael steps in, the veil is pulled back, revealing that God's sovereignty operates even in the unseen places of the cosmos. His intervention also reinforces a foundational truth. God hears prayer, but his responses may be delayed not because he is indifferent, but because unseen resistance must be overcome. This delay is not denial. In fact, it becomes an opportunity for divine reinforcement. When Michael enters the battlefield, it reveals how crucial Daniel's prayer truly was. For 21 days, Daniel fasted and mourned. He didn't stop praying. He didn't stop seeking. And though no answer appeared immediately, his faith was not in vain. It's a spiritual law embedded in this chapter. Persistent prayer mobilizes heaven. When Daniel kept praying, Michael was deployed. When he kept seeking, the resistance was shattered. This story isn't just a record of past events. It's a blueprint for spiritual engagement today. There are princes of Persia still operating, demonic influences that hover over regions, ideologies, systems, and nations, seeking to distort truth, delay answers, and crush faith. But God still sends Michael. In Revelation 12, we see Michael Lagoon waging war against the great dragon, Satan. And just like in Daniel 10, Michael does not retreat. He fights, he overcomes, he casts down. Whether it is over ancient Persia or over the heavens themselves, Michael's presence always signals divine justice and a shift in spiritual atmosphere. What he did in Daniel 10 was not just battle the Prince of Persia. It was a declaration that no power, no principality, no cosmic ruler of darkness can ultimately block the will of God. But there's another revelation hidden in this passage. After dealing with the Prince of Persia, the angel says that the Prince of Greece is coming. This introduces a terrifying idea. Spiritual warfare is not a one-time event. It's continuous. The Prince of Persia may be subdued, but another principality waits in the wings. As earthly empires shift, so do the powers behind them. Persia would soon fall, and Greece would rise. But behind both was a demonic scheme to disrupt God's redemptive plan. And yet, God is not reactive. He is sovereign. The rise and fall of empires, the appearance of angels, the conflict in the heavens, all are under his command. And Michael is the instrument he uses when the opposition is too great, when the stakes are too high, and when the message must get through. What Michael did to the Prince of Persia is not just historical, it's prophetic. It speaks of a time when God's people will face seemingly insurmountable opposition, where answers will feel delayed, and darkness will seem to reign. But those who persist in prayer, like Daniel, will find that heaven is never deaf to their cries. They will discover that God sends warriors to stand in the gap, that the battle in the unseen world is real, but not without hope. In Ephesians 6, Paul reminds believers that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and rulers of darkness in this age. Daniel 10 is a literal manifestation of that reality, but it's also a source of comfort, because if Michael stood for Daniel, he will stand for us. If the Prince of Persia was defeated, so can the principalities of today be overcome. And if God answered then, he still answers now. We often ask why our prayers seem delayed, why breakthroughs take so long, why we wrestle in silence. But perhaps the better question is, what if we could see what's happening behind the veil? What if our fasting, our weeping, our praying are the very things that summon Michael? What if heaven waits for our persistence to activate divine authority? In the end, the victory over the Prince of Persia wasn't just for Daniel. It was for Israel. It was for prophecy. It was for every believer who would ever pray in desperation, wondering if God hears. And through Michael, God answered with fire, with force, and with finality. The prince fell, the message came, and history was changed forever. What you just heard isn't mythology. It's biblical reality. Spiritual battles aren't fought with swords but with angelic assignments, divine timing, and relentless resistance from principalities. Archangel Michael stood in that battle not for glory but for purpose. So the next time your prayers feel delayed, remember, the war in the heavens is real. You are not forgotten, and sometimes the delay is proof that your request has already stirred a reaction in the spirit realm. If this message shook your spirit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, keep watching, because the Bible still speaks.